What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Pitch Please podcast. Today we're talking to Nadia from Marlow. They are the women's menstrual product and the first lubricated tampon. I'm open to learning a lot today. Obviously, as you know, I probably know very little about this subject, but always curious to learn and understand where and how Canadian innovators are pushing and making new ground. So, Nadia, welcome to the show. Obviously, I'm sure you can elaborate way more on where I left off, but tell us a little bit about yourself and what you and the Marlow team have been up to.
For sure. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. Marlowe is a menstrual care brand that's launched the first lubricated tampon for smoother and more comfortable insertion. And it really stemmed from a personal problem. So, in fourth year of university, we all met, all of our co founders. We were in a business program and we were doing an entrepreneurship capstone course. And I remember our professor said to find a problem that you're passionate about solving. And so we started to think about different things that we experience on a weekly, monthly basis. And it happened to be that one of my co founders was on her period that week. And so we started talking about how it's a space that impacts 50% of the population for 1 week every month for 39 years of our life. And yet, as you mentioned, it's a pretty taboo topic. People are ashamed to talk about it, even though it impacts us for so long. It's one of the biggest industries. And so we started to talk about how it's been around for 90 years, and yet there's been little to no innovation. And in a world where we're seeing so much AI and technology and all these other areas that are getting innovated on, why is it that women's health is being ignored? And we started to talk about how not only is the brands such legacy brands and so traditional, but also the products are really uncomfortable. And tampons are something we use every month. Growing up, I was a swimmer. I especially needed them because I couldn't use pads to compete in my sport. And I always got so frustrated because it felt like I had to pause on life. And I noticed so many teammates and other women around me were also experiencing the same thing. And so we had gone to the gynecologist to see if she had any solutions. And she actually said, you can spit on your tampon to make it easier. And we thought, that does not seem hygienic. That does not seem like a good solution. This actually seems like a problem worth solving. And this is the problem we want to focus on for our school project. But since then, since graduating, we've worked on it for the last 3 years and have actually raised money, have launched the product into stores, have gotten Health Canada and FDA approval. We even went on Dragon's Den. So it's really
Wow.
grown a lot since those days. And it all started from that one school project and the decision to take that one course.
Wow. Okay. So much to unpack here. One of the coolest things, so this started as a capstone project,
As a
which
capstone.
is like how many people, I went to school for business and I had capstone projects. You could pay mostly only dream, and I guess some people are like, let's just get the project done. Others like, could the thing that we're talking about right now have real world impact? And that's literally what happened for you and the team is like that. You got so passionate about it and you brought it to life. Talk to us about like before that. Um, During a capstone project, you don't necessarily imagine yourself as an entrepreneur. Before that, did you?
No, definitely not. And it's so funny because in our fourth year, we had already kind of started to recruit for jobs. So I had already signed my offer to work in management consulting with KPMG.
Oh,
And
wow.
there's two streams for your capstone project. You can either do the consulting stream or the entrepreneurship stream. And I remember fighting with my group members because I kept saying, I really want to do the consulting stream. Like I'm already going into consulting. This makes so much more sense. And they kept pushing, no, let's do the entrepreneurship one. Like when else are we ever going to have the opportunity to try to start a business, to have all this network and support? And I was getting so mad at them. I'm like, why can't we just do the consulting stream? But we eventually did the entrepreneurship one, and now it led to the growth of Marlowe today. So I don't think that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but after going through that course and learning about it, seeing what kind of impact you can make, I realized, okay, this is a great path for me, and I really want to actually try this. I'm young, I can take a risk. I don't have, kids or a mortgage. Like, let's actually take a risk and see what happens.
So, what was like the moment when you guys went from solving this for a capstone project to bringing this to life? Because those are very different things, especially in a space that it's a product, right? Like it's not
Mhm.
software, which maybe feels a little bit more accessible to everyone. Like there's a lot more R&D, I would imagine, that goes into this. Maybe some additional approval. I have no idea. We're going to talk about that, but there's obviously a moment, a tipping point. What was that tipping point for you all?
So, as part of the course, you also get paired with an entrepreneur in residence. And so they're like an alumni of the school. They're actually an entrepreneur themselves. And he was actually the one who kept pushing us to go out and start this. And he said, I don't have a background in this, but I've been looking, and this is actually such a smart idea. I can't believe no one else has created this. It's a huge market size. There's so much financial opportunity. You should really go out and start this. And so we kept thinking, like, this is just a school project. Like, we weren't sure if we wanted to do it. We had plans after graduating to go on grad trips, but it was the year of COVID and all those trips got canceled. And so he said, okay, now your assignment is to work on this over the summer. You don't have any plans anyways. What are you going to do? Like, start looking at R&D, start reaching out to Health Canada, start understanding what it would take to build this business. And so over the course of the summer, we started to build prototypes. We started to work with like design firms and engineering firms and research labs. We brought on a regulatory consultant from Health Canada to understand what that pathway could look like. And by the end of the summer, we kind of had an initial idea of how we would go through the R&D process and what the key milestones would be. And it was then that the entrepreneur in residence said, okay, now I'm going to be your first investor and I'll give you $100,000 as your first angel investor to go out and start to do all this testing and to start to build the product and bring it to market. And so I
Wow.
think without him, we wouldn't have actually gone out and done it. But kind of the timing with COVID and his like belief and confidence in us, we decided to go out and actually build the product and start to bring it to market.
And like, don't underestimate that. Sounds like you all got a ton in motion that summer, and that's
Mhm.
probably what the entrepreneur in residence noticed very quickly was your energy and passion to solve the connections and things that you were kind of running at. That's impressive in a short period of time. um, so I want to learn more about those processes. I think they're going to be interesting for anyone that also might be building a product or a health product. But let's bring it back again to the piece where you talked about the challenge and the problem. I think the TAM makes sense, right? I think you talked about that. That one's the obvious one. Maybe what's less obvious, or maybe it's very obvious to our female listeners and very unobvious to our male listeners. But what is the challenge here that needed solving, and why was no one solving this until now?
Mhm. Yeah, most the main challenge is that it's really uncomfortable to insert tampons for a lot of people, and there could be a few reasons. Either maybe you're a young menstruator, you're new to using the products, you have a lot of discomfort, anxiety, and it's everyone kind of has that first tampon story where they are being coached outside the bathroom stall of trying to use it, and it's a really uncomfortable process. Or there's other consumers as they're approaching menopause or even post-pregnancy, you experience a lot of vaginal dryness, and actually 1 in 3 women, according to the National Library of Medicine, go through that vaginal dryness experience. So we kind of have two big groups of customers. Either they're new to menstruating, they have discomfort and anxiety, or they're getting a bit older in their cycle and they're experiencing that lighter flow and that dryness. So those are the two main uses of the people. And then now most people are just trying it and actually thinking, oh, wait, this is so much more comfortable. Why would I use a dry tampon when I can have a more smoother, more comfortable experience? So even people that maybe didn't think they needed the product and didn't have issues, they try it and they say, wait, this is more comfortable. Why would I not use a product like this? And for a lot of the male people that we talk to, we try to come up with like analogies of why would you want to shave without shaving cream or put your contact in with like contact solution, like anything that requires some lubrication. It's the same concept here. Like, why would you not use the lubrication if you had the opportunity to?
Yeah, and until now, it was the advice was to spit on that
Yeah.
thing, which obviously makes probably no sense. To your point, like, is that even hygienic?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure no. And so it just hadn't been solved for years. It was just like, it is what it is. There probably is no better way, and people just left it at that. But
Mhm.
where and when you opened the floodgates around this, you're like, hey, would you prefer a better way?
Mhm.
People started gravitating towards that, and it sounds like you've had pretty good traction.
And I think the main thing was there was a few legacy brands in the space that just dominated the retail shelf space, like Tampax, Playtex, Kotex. And if they're already dominating the space, there's not really an incentive for them to have to innovate and talk to the customers. Like there's only one option. They're already dominating the retail shelf. But now in more recent years, there's been a huge boom around FemTech, understanding women's health, and like a lot more companies, not just in menstrual health, but in fertility, hormone testing, PCOS, endometriosis. Like there's more conversation around women's health in general. And so I think that's why we're seeing more acquisitions in the space, more investment, more interest in like supporting women's health overall.
So, just to be clear at this point, does Marlowe sell both the tampon and the lubricant? Do you need to use a Marlow tampon to use the lubricant? How does that part of the business model work? And then I'm going to want to learn how you even got to this, but I just so I can clarify any of the questions that we're going to talk about today.
For sure. Yeah, we sell both the tampons and the lubricant. We sell them as like a kit, even if you want to buy it together. And you can use the lubricant with other brands of tampons, but we, of course, recommend using the Marlow one. And it's also more environmentally sustainable. So we have 100% organic cotton tampons. We have a plant-based applicator and all compostable wrapper and packaging. So a lot of people opt to use the Marlow tampon for those environmental sustainability reasons because it's more sustainable than a traditional tampon you might find on the retail shelf.
So what's insane to me is there's like a massive supply chain of stuff you needed to do
Mhm.
here. And I imagine, I don't know, like you said Health Canada, but I imagine anything like, is this medical grade? Like, what are the parameters around bringing something like this to market that
Mhm.
goes inside of your body? I imagine it's not as easy as maybe you even imagine, or maybe you guys thought it was going to be this challenging from the beginning. But what were some of those like hurdles, and how do you kind of work through that?
Yeah, no, we definitely underestimated the regulatory piece when bringing it to market. So it's a class 2 medical device because, as you mentioned, it goes internal into your body. So there's a lot of strict regulations and standards around the testing you have to do before you bring it to market. And so we teamed up with a research lab as well as a few doctors and pelvic physiotherapists to do all that testing. And then we submitted the tests to Health Canada. And it took over a year to go through that whole process. So it wasn't a simple process. It was also during COVID when Health Canada was very delayed because they were busy, understandably, managing COVID and doing other priorities. But it led to a huge delay in our timeline. It took, yeah, almost a year and a half to finally actually go through all that whole process and bring the product to market, which is still fast for a medical device, but it was a long process to go through it. And then from there, we were actually able to find manufacturers, start to build out the supply chain, find a shipping and logistics company, a warehouse, all of those aspects. And now it's kind of settled and built out, but it took a while to build all those different supply chain pieces and find the right partners to bring this product to market.
What are some of your biggest like learnings or how you would chunk that out for people that are, whether it's a medical product or any product? I think oftentimes, probably in the course of the last 5 years, 10 years, the majority of startups lean towards technology, right?
Mhm.
We don't see as many physical products. There are still a lot. There's tons out there, and we brought some on the show, and but I think it's partially because it's a less known territory. It feels like there's more barriers to entry and obstacles. So I think it'd be good to get your learnings and advice from having gone through that of how someone that maybe imagines building physical product should be thinking about it. And what were some of the parts that you wish you had known, a year ago when you started to make your journey easier?
There's a couple of things. I would say one is definitely getting a regulatory consultant early. At first, we were trying to understand all of Health Canada's policies ourselves, and it's full of so much jargon and complex language. And we didn't come from a science background, so it was very hard for us to understand what exactly they were asking us for. But as soon as we had that consultant, she built out a whole strategy for us. She clearly told us these are the types of tests that need to be done. Partner with this lab, they'll be able to help you conduct these studies. And it made it so much easier and smoother. And it was more just following a process that she had outlined for us. So I would say find a consultant, find an expert who knows this space. If you have a science background, maybe you don't need to do that. But if you don't, and you're coming from the business side, having someone who could be an advisor and help you through that process is super helpful. And I would say the other thing is optimizing your packaging. So from the start, we had this beautiful box that opens and it almost looks like a chocolate box. And our idea was, oh, it's a beautiful unboxing experience. For D2C, it worked really well. But as soon as we started to get into retail, it was way too big to fit on a retail shelf and it was like flat. So it didn't look good. So we had to completely change all of our packaging and make it more like a traditional tampon box that could sit well on the shelf. And there was all this like text we had to add that retailers wanted. So I think if you know that eventually down the line you want to get into retail and there's certain channel partners, just optimizing your packaging from the start, even if you don't go into retail right away, then you don't have to go through a whole packaging redesign midway through your company because you need to meet some of those standards. And there's a lot of strict guidelines that especially the big retailers want to see on your packaging. So just maybe talking to a couple of them or talking to a consultant in the space so that you design your packaging right from the start and you don't have to change it midway through as you start to get into those retail partners.
Is that something you did as well? Was like a consultant specifically in retail packaging, a consultant specifically in navigating Health Canada? It sounds like you brought in some expertise in some very specific things so you could
Hmm.
focus on your product journey and the vision of the company, not necessarily
Exactly.
navigating these things that were probably a little bit more point in time. I don't
Hmm.
think you're doing them and iterating on them every day. You're not iterating with Health Canada every day. You're not iterating on your packaging every day. So those are a bit more point in time things, and that's where you kind of brought people in as experts.
Exactly. Yeah, we brought in a paid regulatory consultant to help us with that whole process. And then for the packaging, we actually brought in more of an advisor. So we have an advisor who had her own women's health brand. She used to work at L'Oreal. So she's very familiar with like retail consumer products. And so she kind of brought in and just like gave us more advice throughout the whole process. So there is like consultants that you can work with on packaging. But I think even if you find like more of an overall advisor who can support you on marketing, retail sales, that could also be another channel. And she has equity in the company, and we meet with her on like a bi-weekly basis to go through our strategy, go through current priorities that we're working on. So I think, yeah, you can either find like a paid consultant, or you can also start to bring on advisors in key areas of the business as well.
Where do you start when trying to find these? Like, maybe it was literally that one after another, but it seems like you found really good people right away that seemingly were affordable enough for you to use on your journey as a startup. And I imagine that might be trickier for others. Like, oh, I need a regulatory consultant, and the person comes in and says this is going to cost you 250,000, and you've made $0. That feels like you're at different ends of the spectrum of what you're trying to achieve. How did you find these right people, or did it naturally just kind of happen because of the problem you were solving?
I think there's a couple ways. One, we did a few accelerator programs. So we were a part of Next 36, League of Innovators, and Sheboot. And through those programs, they have such an amazing team of advisors, mentors that support the programs. And even if that person couldn't help, like we just got comfortable saying, oh, do you know someone in your network who might be able to help? And so through this like web of connections, we eventually landed on the right person. But it was also a lot of cold outreach on LinkedIn. Like if we kind of Googled and looked at different people who have the expertise, and we would just like cold outreach them and say, hey, you have this amazing company in your portfolio that we look up to. We've seen you've worked with them in the past. Like, this is what we're working on. Would you be open to a 20-minute call? And like, of course, not everyone's going to say yes, but a few people know where you are been. And like, they've also been in your shoes at one point. So they're willing to take that 10, 15 minutes to talk to you. And so I think just like getting comfortable putting yourself out there and reaching out to someone on LinkedIn and seeing what they say.
That's cool. So I think that's a good piece of advice, which is just be bold and reach out. Like I think sometimes people look for like this formal path, and is it going to be on Fiverr or something? But a lot of times it is just cold calling, door knocking, and leveraging the network of yourself, others, and these incubators. Maybe it's actually a good moment to talk about, like, obviously we got connected through LOI or League of Innovators, and they help support a lot of Canadian startups. What drew you to LOI or League of Innovators, and where or how has that been instrumental sort of in your own startup journey?
Yeah, I really liked LOI because it supported youth founders. And so I felt that there would be a lot of programming that could like help us, but also there would be a huge network of founders who are like around our age and like also going through the same thing. And so having that like accountability, those peer groups, we called them like founder huddles, those were so helpful because as much as the guest speakers were amazing and the different advisors they brought on board, I feel like sometimes someone who's just going through the trenches like you are, and you can just be like, hey, how did you find that? How did you optimize your packaging? Which retailers have you reached out to? And just like those maybe day-to-day execution type questions, having someone to bounce ideas off of and work through them, that was super helpful. And now those people have become such good friends. Like the past couple weeks, we went to like a cottage all together and just like hung out and like just kind of decompressed and like had a bunch of fun together. Like we'll do co-working days, or we had like a founder volleyball team. So I feel like just also having those friendships and relationships outside of the accelerator and putting investment into like getting to know the person on a deeper level, that's been super helpful. And of course, the program's awesome. Like I got to give a shout out to Joel because he is so helpful. And anytime you message him with any question you have, he is always happy to answer or point you in the right direction. And he has an amazing network. And also then the founders that you can connect with through the program too.
That's super cool. So it sounds like part of it is going to help your business accelerate and grow, but part of it's just helping you.
Mhm.
And I think the ups and downs of being a founder and creating community around that with people that are like-minded, sharing stories, sharing, you know, challenges of what they're facing in their startup journey or in their personal lives. And it feels like those two things are coming together harmoniously to kind of help you continue to make forward traction.
Definitely.
So the where is Marlowe at today? And you've mentioned a few of these things that I think are like maybe I'm glossing over them too quick, and we should dive in. Like you're in retailers, that's huge. You had direct to consumer. Where are you at in this journey, and what kind of were those milestones along the way?
So after we got our Health Canada and FDA approval, which took about a year, we brought the product to market, and now we've been in market for about 2 years. We started all just D2C, and it was working well to grow the brand, but we realized that we wanted to expand beyond that. And so we launched on Amazon, and I think that has been our biggest channel for growth. It's been
Wow.
absolutely amazing. Most of our sales are coming off of Amazon right now. And I think when we launched, a lot of people are just organically searching for products on Amazon, like a customer going onto the platform is in the mood to shop, they're looking for the right fit versus, it might be hard for them to come across your website or to discover you on socials. And at that time, they might not be interested in buying. So I think Amazon, I would recommend it, especially to any like personal care, consumer product. Like it's a huge channel for growth. And once we started to see traction on Amazon, then we started to catch the eyes of certain retailers. And so we got a distribution partner who helped us land in some of the accounts. We're now in over 200 retail doors, and our biggest account is Whole Foods. So
Wow.
that one was, they have like a startup small business program that we originally pitched to them. And through that program, we were able to eventually land in stores and get the product on shelf. So definitely Amazon is a huge channel, but the retail one is quickly growing, and we want to get into more retail partners in the coming year as well.
That's super cool. But the piece around Amazon, like I have to ask, and I feel like it must have been one of the biggest challenges, which was you are creating a product that people insert into their body.
Mhm.
Credibility and brand have to have a ton of impact.
Mhm.
And there's incumbents in this space that, you know, are been around for a long time and so have inevitably a lot of trust. And so sometimes, like when you buy something on Amazon, say it's a charger, you're like, okay, it has decent reviews, but if this charger stops working, like I'm not impacted tremendously. I imagine that had to have had an effect on your own journey that you had to kind of overcome at the beginning. What was that like taking on, what we'll call titans in the space and a lot of people with existing footprint that you had to go build credibility against
Mhm.
until you got this momentum?
I think reviews were super important in that, like making sure that we could get as many people who have tried the product to leave reviews, like asking our friends and family to like buy the product, but like we'll, help you whatever you need to do, like to help just make sure you can like write the review. So that was really helpful as well. And we drove a lot of our own traffic onto the platform through socials. So we have this entire community called the TMI Club, where we break down anything that's TMI around periods, reproductive health, women's health, sexual health. And so just using that content on TikTok, on Instagram to drive people to the Amazon store. And a lot of people were already interested in the product, but the biggest thing that kept getting them was the shipping cost, because
Mm.
depending where you were ordering from, you're paying $10 to $15 in shipping for one box, which is the price of a box. So you're basically spending the same amount to get it shipped to you versus Amazon. You can do Amazon Prime and you pay nothing in shipping. And so we saw our conversion rates skyrocket, and a lot of people that were already maybe interested in purchasing the brand but never triggered the purchase, now we're able to because of that Prime shipping, because of Prime Day sales. So that was super helpful, was just to have a more convenient experience for them, and that one-click buy on Amazon that people are really used to.
So the reviews were a big piece of that, but do you feel like if you could do it all again, it sounds like you started in a direct to consumer motion, and
Mhm.
that had an inherent cost for shipping that was maybe unjustifiable.
Mhm.
And those are really your hardcore fans, like people that saw value in the product so much so that they were probably overpaying because of that shipping cost
Mhm.
to what they were used to paying. Would you tell people maybe like just jump, like don't think
Mhm.
about the direct to consumer, um use a channel, and Amazon
Mhm.
being a channel that as long as the type of product you have could fit within the things people buy on Amazon, go there first and then go to retail and maybe just jump past the direct to consumer thinking? Or would
Mhm.
you still say that there were some learnings and value in starting direct to consumer and then working into distribution?
I think I would say jump straight to Amazon. Maybe that's controversial depending on each of your space, but I think a lot of people underestimate how much marketing dollars and effort it takes to drive people to your website. Like people aren't just going to stumble across it versus Amazon. People are already organically shopping on the platform. And so if someone's searching organic tampons on Amazon, they can like we were sponsoring that keyword and they would discover Marlowe. So people are already in that mindset. They're already searching for terms around like smooth tampon, organic tampon, sustainable tampon, and we can advertise for those keywords and have ourselves be discovered versus trying to drive people off of socials or off of SEO onto our website. And so I think it is really important to still have a D2C so that you can have a community and you can have that brand presence, you can tell your story, you can understand how to do all these different digital marketing initiatives, but to really drive that like larger scale volume and sales, that's where Amazon comes in because there's already so many people on the platform interested in purchasing a product like yours.
And do you feel like the work that you did around TMI Club
Mhm.
helped create that surround? Like that's bold, right? Like how when you all sat down and talked about this, like there's risks in that. Like, is it gonna
Mhm.
work? Is it gonna like are people gonna follow it? Is that gonna lead to brand sales?
Mhm.
What did that conversation look like? And it sounds like the bet paid off.
Mhm.
Um, but why do you feel it's working? And what was the conversations pre rolling that out? Or maybe, as a startup, maybe you're just like, let's do it. Like, what's the worst that could happen? So talk
Yeah.
to me about that a little bit.
I think for us, we always knew that we wanted our brand to stand for something more. Like, we didn't want to just be known as a lubricated tampon company, but actually as a company that's transforming menstrual health and opening up the conversation. Like, we wanted to have a brand platform and brand values that we could stand on. And we thought the only way we can do that as a smaller brand in the space is through TikTok and Instagram. Because I feel like these social media platforms have allowed smaller brands to actually make an impact in the space and to have their voices be heard. And so we started by just posting on TikTok. Called it like our big sister content, where any question that you had, and we would Google what are the most common questions people have about periods and like see what was trending SEO wise. And we would create videos around that and like create that 3 second hook, make aesthetic recaps and like really start posting the behind the scenes of building the business. And the first couple months, it was like slowly growing, but within the like third or fourth month, it started to take off. And we started to see that like videos were going viral and we were getting millions of views. And now we've had to date 100 million views on TikTok, and we have more followers than Tampax, Playtex, Kotex, like all of the bigger
Wow.
brands, and we have a 15 times higher engagement rate on socials. And so I think it showed that people were interested in having these types of conversations, but they were just too nervous to. And TikTok really opened up because now anyone can talk about anything on TikTok, and it's a much more open platform. And especially for those Gen Z consumers who wanted to have these type of conversations, maybe it was stuff you couldn't learn in your school health classes. They were coming to us as like a thought leader and knowledgeable resource in the space to get to learn and understand about your body.
And what was that inflection point, or was it just time? Was there something that created that change? Like everyone's always like, how do we go viral? And it's almost impossible to pick or create the moment to go viral. But where did you see that inflection point in this for you?
Yeah, I think part of it was consistency. Like we were posting 3 to 5 videos every single day. Each of the team member would be responsible for making a video every day. And we're like, maybe this is not scalable, but in the early days, we got to be posting a lot of content to just get our name out there. And then of those 3 to 5 videos, we would see, okay, which one performed the best that day? And like, let's dissect it and see what is working well. And we realized that the hook was the most important part of the video. So that first 3 seconds. And even if you think about the own content you consume, like if someone's like, stop scrolling, like I need to tell you about this period hack, or here's 3 ways to like optimize your next cycle. Oh my God, you guys gotta try this lubricated tampon that I just tried. Like that first 3 seconds of the video made such a big difference. And so we kept brainstorming what are different hooks that we could do? What are those key things that people are trying to learn about that we can make videos, and just like dissecting and analyzing every single video that did well and how could we recreate it and understand that formula to going viral. And now I feel like we have 2 or 3 concepts that we know always work, and we like try to follow that formula in every video that we make to keep getting good engagement online.
That's really cool that you were getting really hands on and dissecting it in that detail, and probably to some benefit that you all had knowledge or expertise in that area to take it forward. But I think it was a really cool angle. I don't know if it works for everyone. Like maybe it does. Maybe it's like, hey, how do you create really good hooks? Bring your product or solution to TikTok. It depends on where your audience is, I guess. And in your scenario, the audience is perfectly right for maybe a B2B software solution aimed at the oil and gas industry. Like maybe that's not the right fit. but you really embraced the channel where your consumers are and activated that. So, looking forward, what's sort of like the next year have in store for Marlowe? It sounds like you've made amazing strides. You're available in retailers. You should list a bunch of that off right now, by the way. So, anyone listening, they're probably engaged right now or knows someone that could benefit from this. To your point, 50%. But, like, where can people find out more? Where can people get this? And what's in store for you for the next year?
Definitely, yeah. So you can buy us at Whole Foods, Healthy Planet, Nature's Emporium. We're at like Sweat and Tonic. So there's a lot of different places that you can purchase us. Amazon definitely is probably the easiest one. If your cycle's coming up, you can get it delivered next day or sometimes even same day, depending where you live. And also following us online and subscribing to like our email newsletter, following us on TikTok, Instagram to get access to that content. We also host monthly community events. So like a spin class at Sweat and Tonic, a hot girl walk, like any kind of ways to meet people across the city. You can come and learn about your health with us. And then in terms of what's next, we closed $1.9 million in funding to date, which we're super excited about. Part of that came from US investors. So definitely in the next year, we want to double down on the US market. And one of my co-founders is going to be moving to the US. So being able to just like expand there, get into more retailers there, because a lot of our retail presence is currently Canadian and we want to grow that out in the US market. Expanding to some bigger retail chains, like getting into like the CVS, Target, Shoppers Drug Mart of the world. That's really where we can see a lot of volume. And then we have a few ideas for new products that we want to launch to continue to be in that period care thought leader space and new ideas to improve on like pads and menstrual cups and other ideas. So we're excited next year to launch some big product ideas that we have as well.
That's super cool and amazing progress. I actually have like a really interesting debatable topic, and I'm not going to hold you to it, but there's this piece which is probably most acute in the Canada US market, right? In Europe
Mhm.
it's a bit different because there's language and stuff. But in Canada US there's always this tension where naturally the TAM in the US is desirable and makes a lot of sense for Canadian companies. Do you see Marlow continuing to at least hold roots in Canada and service the US market from here? Or do you feel maybe you feel a natural tension where it almost feels like you need to fully move there and you're resisting it? Like, what does that feel like for startups in this space? Because we've talked to, on the pod, I think last week we just released, a couple weeks ago, we just released Humi, who's a Canadian HR platform built in Canada, servicing just Canadian customers, and that works for them. We're going to be releasing, or by the time this gets released, we've released a podcast with Mike Wessinger of Point Click Care, probably one of the most, infamous and, successful Canadian SaaS companies in the health tech space that was a Canadian company that serviced from abroad. But there's this natural tension that, especially now in 2024, I think a lot of founders are feeling. What are your thoughts on that, and what are you feeling, and what's that sort of look like in your own dialogues?
Yeah, it's definitely hard because, like you said, the US market is so much bigger and it's also more profitable. Like the shipping cost to get from Toronto to Vancouver is crazy. We have such a big country and it becomes so expensive for the company. But shipping across the US, like it's much smaller and you can get a lot cheaper shipping rates. So that's definitely a challenge. The investment opportunities in the US are just so much more as well. I find in Canada, you'll be meeting with someone for months and months and you don't even know where it's going to go, versus the US investors are very straight up. They'll either say, hey, not a fit right now and come back to us, or they'll say, hey, let's keep the conversation going and your deals can close within a couple months. So I've noticed that that's been a big difference. And the marketing dollar goes so much further there. Like they have such a bigger population. So any money you spend on ad spend and things like that, like you get a better return on that ad spend versus in Canada where maybe there's not as many people to reach and touch on. So we want to keep that Canadian roots and we want to keep the built in Canada, but sometimes it's hard because you do see how much further your money can go when you're in the US market as well.
And do you feel like you can do that successfully while staying in Canada and just service that market and take advantage of that? Or do you feel, or like either you feel intrinsically, or maybe you're seeing pressure to
Mhm.
move and become a US company? What does that look like? And, do you have any thoughts on how we continue to breed and build the Canadian ecosystem up based on
Mhm.
you probably being at the, tipping point of this challenge, very real challenge that I think a lot of people in tension, it's an internal debate, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. We definitely feel a lot of pressure from like advisors, investors, especially now that we've brought on some US investors and they're really pushing us to just focus on the US market and not worry too much about Canada. But I know like this is where our roots started, this is where our community is. So we want to keep servicing that market. I think it'd be more important for Canada to have more early stage investment. Like I think if you've grown your company to a certain point, there's a lot of VC opportunity and investment dollars in Canada, but not in consumer products. Like it's mostly tech, B2B SaaS. So for our industry, like having more investment in Canada for consumer products and at the earliest stage, because it's mostly once you've scaled to a certain point, then you can unlock that money. Versus in the US, there's a lot more investment for early stage companies. You might not even have a product on the market. So just having more flexibility and more appetite for risk in Canada for some of these earlier stage companies.
And that's really like a local thing at that
Mhm.
point, which is like local early seed, pre-seed, angel type money to
Mhm.
get you to that first meaningful product market fit moment where
Exactly.
money can, it doesn't matter where you're located, people will invest in you from all areas and abroad. So cool. Any other thoughts on like, because I think this podcast started and so far has held its ground on featuring Canadian startups. And I think we're going to continue to try to find people who have made it and continue to bring that back to those trying to break through in the Canadian ecosystem. But what are other thoughts or things that you think could help make this ecosystem more vibrant and people desire to service the international markets, but call this home and kind of manage those tensions that you're feeling?
I think also more education in like high schools, elementary schools, universities about entrepreneurship because before getting into university, I didn't even kind of realize that it's a viable career path. I know both my parents are immigrants. They worked stable corporate jobs. They've always wanted that. That's just kind of like their mindset. They're not very risk taking. And so I never even considered it as a path. But now I know I went to Western and just last weekend I attended the opening of the entrepreneurship building that they have on campus. And so it's a building now just dedicated to fostering entrepreneurship on campus. And I think much more universities, much more high schools need to integrate that so people see it as a normal career path. Because for a long time, entrepreneurship was misunderstood. It's very seen as glamorous and, it's a cool path to go down, but just like also showing the real life scenarios of what it takes to be an entrepreneur. I think that will help also foster more entrepreneurship in Canada too.
Awesome. Love it, Nadia. And hopefully, I look forward to hopefully seeing Marlowe continue to call Canada home base, but take over not just Canada and the US market, but globally from here. And hopefully that you can manage those tensions and make that happen. Um, a question I always just like to ask because it's kind of cool to understand like what's going on within the startup. But usually I say $100,000. I don't think $100,000 is going to tip the scales based on the direction you guys are going. But say I add $1 million to invest. What would Marlowe, you and the Marlowe team do? What would you invest that into right now at this current moment in your journey?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say definitely marketing. We're seeing so much success on Amazon. So investing in more Amazon advertising, being able to run more promotions, also doing more. We have like campus ambassadors and like programs at schools. So investing in more of like those community events, grassroots ways. Like I feel like instead of using influencers and more of the bigger scale things, we've just been very grassroots and like using everyday menstruators and university students to like help grow the brand and brand awareness. So I think investing in some of those programs and then also in that product development and some of the exciting new products that we're working on, being able to have the capital to bring some of those to market too.
That's super cool. Again, Nadia, thank you for coming on the show and talking to us about your journey. I learned a ton about not just the space that you're playing in, but the journey to get there. And I think there's some unique things that not every founder experiences or maybe aren't talked about as much. So it's like, how do you use ChatGPT to build your AI SaaS app? Like, I think it's cool to hear the unique stories of very different businesses. Before we wrap up, wanted to kind of let you have the last say, see if there's any final closing thoughts from you, either for founders, people working at startups, or other people that are considering becoming an innovator but haven't yet taken the leap.
Yeah, I would say just remember success doesn't happen overnight. I feel like online we always see like that moment where you get Forbes 30 under 30 or you're on Dragon's Den or you closed your investment round or you launched a big new retailer and like that success takes a lot of time to get there and people just see that highlight and that big moment but you don't see all the hard work and like the grinding that's happening to get to that point and I feel like sometimes it can be discouraging for founders to think like, oh, am I on the right path or like why am I not doing enough or what's going on, but just remembering that it takes time to get to those moments and if you keep working you're not going to fail until you give up and you decide to. So I think just remembering that if you put in the hard work eventually through some pivoting and through finding the right people to bring on board, you'll get to that success moment, but you just have to wait it out long enough and try your best to figure out how to get there.
I love that advice. Patience is obviously not the thing you hear most often in the startup space in a world where people want to move fast, break things, and succeed. And so I love the need to equally focus on being patient and continuing to work hard. So thank you again, Nadia, for coming on. Excited to continue watching and following the Marlowe story. For everyone that tuned in again, hope you enjoyed a bit of a different episode. Learned a lot from Nadia and the Marlowe story, and hope you tune into the next episode. So thanks again, everybody, and have a great day.
Thanks so much.